know it's a little bit late, but we're going to get started here momentarily. We have the incredible fortune to have one of last year's judges, Josh Benton, with us, who's a Messiah alum, and one of the original founders at And Culture, which is a, when you find out more about them, a design company here in Harrisburg that does a lot of innovative stuff with startups, and they've done a number of startup things themselves. And Evan is his colleague, who's here, partner, pardon me, and just so excited about the dialogue we had about bringing this workshop online. It was a vision that started last April, May, and we had a couple meetings, and they've kind of given up their time to put together tonight, filling a void in our curriculum around product design and development. And so some of you are actually building digital products, and some of you don't realize it yet, but you will be building digital products, because any business, right, my favorite line these days is any company is a tech company, and every company is a tech company. So no matter what space you're in, even if that's just having an active web presence and thinking about social media, you kind of need to think about those things. So I am delighted that they've come. They're bringing really some best practices, ideas to you tonight for you to kind of be exposed to, and I think they'll be well served by that. I want to, in typical fashion, give you 30 seconds to give the name of your company and a soundbite about what it's all about, because these guys want to know a little more about what you're doing. And, Justin, I picked on you last time, so I'm going to pivot over to my right. We just had a great phone call with their sponsor, one of their sponsor organizations. So, Tommy, go ahead and speak up the name of the company, or sorry, not. Who wants to honor?
So we don't have an established name. We're working with the Lancaster County Coalition for Refugees to create a mobile experience that allows refugees to, as they're getting established in the country, to have easier access to information about the resources available to them, because a lot of times it's very difficult to navigate, especially as someone who's very new to the country.
We really have a product vision, right? That Lancaster County is our design partner because the entire country has this problem. Lest we think we're a project, we're a problem, right? Awesome. Kira. Kira, speak up.
I'm part of a team working on Match, which is a database-driven web application to connect shelters with potential adopters of dogs in the area. And so through applications and so that they can figure out which adopter would be the best fit for that dog.
I think you're thinking about interfacing with the PetSmart API.
Yes, it's
Right.
with your
That's fine.
yes.
Great. A, B, C.
So we're ABC, our Beyond Classroom, and we're a creative intervention program. We just accepted 5 new members and are hoping to open 2 new locations, but currently we're in Hershey Medical Center's Children's Hospital.
Fathering.me.
Father.me is an organization seeking to connect the young men connected with unplanned pregnancies or crisis or at-risk pregnancies with strong mentors who help them get the best as they can.
Thank you, Justin. Ladies.
We're Juntos, and our aim is to employ Mexican artisans who are making coffee mugs and to pay them fair wages and have them print Bible verses on the mugs and then bring them back to the States and sell them here as a ministry to people in the U.S.
Andrew?
We are Grace Aquaponics. We are growing food in an aquaponic system, growing enough and selling enough to cover our expenses, and then giving away the rest to insecure populations.
Awesome. Hi, and go back.
David, yeah, we don't have a name yet, but we came to explore IVC. So we applied as a group event planning app that we're working on, but we were planning on iterating to a solid solar sculpture that people can have in their homes to charge things. So like a plant with solar cells.
So you just moved in?
Yeah, I think that's what we talked about it.
Great. Okay, I didn't know that. See, that's why I'm here. I learn where you guys are going. That's awesome. Thank you. So we're here, then we're over. Yeah.
Yeah, we're Grove International, so international tourism agency. We're kind of off the premise that people want to experience culture these days, trying to bring the idea of back into the masses. And we do that through connecting local church plants, vocationally, to give them church plants to provide those, and then as well as providing financially our revenue goes to these church plants.
Awesome. We're good. We're all together. Well, I'm going to hand it over to my colleagues here. Their materials will be available to you at impactventurechallenge.com for your perusal. And a reminder, I know Kira Momentos maybe wasn't here for the kickoff October 27th. Please go check for the round 2 workshop slides. Is the video up now?
The video will not be up for a little bit.
Okay.
It's held up, but it'll be there.
Okay, no worries. So the main thing is the slide deck and the Word doc for the round 2 template that should guide your creation of a doc for round 2 submit due November 30th. Without further ado.
Thank you. So thank you very much for having us, and thanks just for the great intro. Just to kind of get an idea of what the composition is here. So I'm going to take it that not everyone here is a technology major or a business major or something like that, correct? Education, okay, art, all right. Any English majors here? No? All right, all the same. Okay, so how many business majors? Whether it's marketing, business administration, okay. And is it mostly concentrations in like accounting, or is it marketing, or business admin? All of the above, okay. Any comp sci or computer? Okay, all right. Wow, so we've got a really diverse population. So one of the challenges that Evan and I were talking about when we were sort of formulating this presentation is, who was going to be in the group. And it seems like we have everyone, which is both really fun, but it's very challenging from the standpoint that, one of the things that we don't want to be doing is, talking way below your level, and certainly the other thing that we don't want to be doing is talking way above. So certainly, if any of you have any questions about anything that we say at any time, feel free to raise your hand or call out. In no way did we intend for this to be sort of like a unilateral, exchange. On the other hand, if at any moment we sense that this is just way too boring, we'll try to speed it up. Exactly. So, Evan, I apologize, but I need to steal a line from Evan. So, Evan was going to say that we graduated from Messiah in the last millennium, which is true. So, and so many things have changed.
And we're all thinking that anyway.
Right. It was last year. No. And so many things have changed from the late 90s until today. And in fact, we were just discussing before this event got started. The phrase "bring your own device." I mean, had Evan or I heard that in the late 90s, we'd be like, what are you talking about? The way the world interacts, the way people interact with each other, the way the world consumes information these days, it's moving so fast, and of course everything, as Brian said, is so technologically based. And the thing that we find so often is when people think about their startup, they fail to realize that even though their startup might not be quote unquote a tech-based startup, in fact, at some level it is. And so that's always a challenging aspect of getting any play on the on-prem.
So what do you mean?
So, excellent question. My major was marketing.
I'm sorry.
There you go. So, I think what's interesting about kind of our paths is when I graduated from Sci, I did have a marketing degree. I think, this is going to sound terrible, but I think I'm one of the few people who has a marketing degree from the Sci that's always been employed in some marketing function. But I actually, I got a job directly out of school. I had an internship and then turned into a job. I worked for Caterpillar, the dirt digging company, machine company. So I worked for Caterpillar for about a year and a half. And that was a really good experience because my job was actually working with the then very nascent website. The web in heavy equipment was still a very, new and early thing. And so I got a front row seat at seeing how, the web worked at an enterprise level. And the neat thing about Caterpillar is, Cat is a company whose economics depend upon, developing stuff, digging holes, building buildings. One of the reasons I left is because for me to go forward with Cat meant that I would have to move pretty consistently, meaning like once every year. And I would have to move to places like Thailand and India and China. And I was also a person that got married very early when I was in size, so that really wasn't going to. We're still married, almost 19 years later.
Trying to start a business.
yeah, don't do that. So I left Cat, and then I worked for General Electric. Another great experience with the Fortune 500 company, but I really very quickly learned that working in corporate America is actually not as exciting as you think it might be. I know, it's hard to imagine. It's kind of like, living in a cubicle. And, even though I guess I was in their management training program, the reality is that, to really go forward in companies like that, at least for me, would have taken years and years. And, I wanted to be involved in new things and in dynamic things. And because of that, I went and I worked with my partner, Evan, and we have a third partner who's not here tonight, obviously, whose name is Dave Hickathir. And we created a company that is now known as Culture. And Culture has been around for about 17 years. So before I go too far, let me just let Evan kind of interject that.
My roommate was one of the original partners as well, and we started it in dorm room here at Sci College. We did the science website for a while. So out of school, we just kept going. So at that point, it was early internet. You could knock on someone's door, like a bicycle shop, and be like, "Hey, you want a website? $3." And so that's kind of how it started. And obviously, it just totally changed almost every 2 years from that point to what it is.
So from an agenda standpoint, we did the welcome. Hello. So really what we're looking to do is tell you a little bit about what Culture does as a company, because it's kind of part and parcel to sort of the process that we're going to talk about today. Obviously, we're going to talk about things like product design and what an MVP or a minimally viable product looks like. We're going to talk about some tools that might help you sort of in your journey develop things faster, particularly if you're not a computer engineer or a computer science person. And then finally, there's a questions and answer session. But the thing I would say is, if you have any questions, feel free to kind of interject as we go. So this is our wonderful logo. And Culture is an experience design and engineering company, and it says that we're focused on the future of healthcare, education, and government, which is a really fancy way of saying most of our client work happens in healthcare. And education and government. But probably, I would say, I think the last time I looked at it, around, quite a bit, around 40% of our work is in healthcare. And the reason behind that is because healthcare is just a massive universe. It's about a $2 trillion industry in the US alone. To put that in perspective, we spend more every year in healthcare in this country than this country spent on the Afghanistan and Iraq war combined. So that is a gigantic amount of spending. And also, healthcare is a really expansive term. I mean, that includes everything from having open heart surgery to to going to a chiropractor. So it's a very big universe. We do a lot of.
It's also a colossal mess. So if you design and build stuff like we do, you get to be a magician in a space that otherwise is kind of dry. So it's a lot of fun to work in. And at the end of the day, you're doing something that's probably positive. And at one point or another, us before you will be heavy consumers of it. So we try to fix it before we get there.
So one quick word about our work in healthcare, which is very relevant to this presentation, is that Professor Nejma, we're going to give you a slightly different version of the presentation because we didn't realize we put in a highly sensitive slide detailing one of our clients' entire computer system. So that's a really big security no-no, but at least we're keeping it real. The person that helped us develop this presentation internally from Man Culture inserted a slide that Evan and I just looked at when we were here, and we said, that's the real thing. You probably shouldn't have that in there.
That's good for us to know.
Right. So Man Culture is a multidisciplinary experience design firm that crafts digital, brand, and service experiences. That's a really fancy way of saying we use design to solve problems, typically business problems. And when I say design, I'm not just talking about visual design, although that's a very important aspect of what we do, but I'm really talking about design as a holistic discipline that includes a spectrum of things that, yes, visual design, but all the way to systems design and design of computer source code. So we use all those tools, frankly, with a bit of sort of management consulting know-how to solve problems for clients. And it's a really dynamic environment that we work in. There's a little over 30 people that work in Man Culture, and they all have different roles. Some of them are artists, some of them are people like me who do business development, which is a nice way of saying sales. Some of the folks are like Evan that really bring a unique combination of kind of the art and science behind not only design, but also how technology works. But everyone works together in a variety of teams to really solve client problems and deliver solutions. So wow, that's a really tough picture, but this is where we work. It's in downtown Harrisburg, and we also have a small office in Philadelphia now, which is exciting.
We have a cool office, so we can attract smart people like you to come work with us.
It's a great space, it's really great fun.
So who we are. So really quickly, a little over 30 employees, all sorts of different disciplines from artists. We even have someone with an anthropology degree. And believe it or not, we also have hired a fair amount of people that aren't necessarily computer science engineers or visual designers. We've hired folks that have English degrees because a lot of our clients need content, frankly. We've hired people that have fine art degrees. So when we look at solving problems, again, it comes back to looking at a solution as a holistic thing that isn't just centered or focused in one specific area. And so we need a whole bunch of different skill sets. And the neat thing that I will mention specifically, I joke about it, but it's actually reality, is about a third of the folks that work at Man Culture are Messiah artists, which is wonderful. So this is a really cool slide that shows that we do a lot of traveling. No, actually, I think that's relevant because the work that we do, it really is, we have clients all across the US. It's a really interesting position to be in because, as a small Harrisburg company, we get to be involved in solving problems for companies and organizations, whether it's Mayo Clinic or startups on the West Coast, or even companies locally here like Giant Foods. So we do travel quite a bit. So just a really quick sort of a look at what we do specifically, and this is a little bit washed out, but again, when I talk about creating holistic solutions across a spectrum of different skill sets, they generally fall into one of these 8 areas. So obviously there's a strategy consulting component, talking to clients about what their problems are, actually defining them, figuring out how to solve them before you build anything. That requires, of course, research and experience design. So we have some marketing folks that literally do market research. Certainly there's things like business and service design, which we'll talk more about tonight. Visual design, of course, which is very important, how it looks and how it feels. And by the way, just to embarrass him, here's our third partner, our CEO, Dave.
It starts at 7:30, right?
Now, to embarrass him further, Dave is not an inside graduate, but his brother is. So that still counts. And of course, we do a lot of work with product design, whether it's electronic or digital or physical products. We'll talk more about that tonight. Big component of what we do is the computer science, the actual engineering and development of code. So I think, we've got 12 engineers on our...
I have to look at where they sit. Yes.
And as a side note, we're very fortunate to have Andrew joining us as an intern in the not too distant future. Of course, because we do engineering and development, certainly app design and development is a big component of that. And then finally, one of the areas that kind of ties it all together is making things look and feel good to the user. So that, of course, is experience and user experience design. So typically, our engagements are structured in 3 areas. Usually, at the beginning of working with a client, we go through a discovery and ideation period. That's largely sort of the business consulting mechanics, what we do, defining the problem, finding the solution. That then certainly transitions into a period of working with clients where we're actually building the solution and testing it from an electronic standpoint typically, and then deploying it, making sure it works. However, the one thing I would mention is that certainly not everything that we do is electronic in nature. And then finally, there's sort of that feedback loop that once we've created a solution and once we've launched it into the marketplace, we get it into actual user hands and people start using it. And typically, there's iterative cycles that happen after that. You have to refine what you've done. You've got to solve problems, or there's bugs, or people don't like the way the service design works. Again, some of the things I'm going to talk about tonight. And then this is our wonderful slide where we get to brag about ourselves and show you all the great clients that we are running with. There's a lot of luminaries on there. So I'm going to hand it over to Evan, who's going to give you just kind of a real-world example here.
So we have one case study. This is a project that started with business development and went all the way to the digital product that we built for them. A company called Kids Discover. You may know them. They're the supplementary non-fiction education magazine style things that you had in school, like pyramids or cells or things like that. So legacy business, been successful publishing these magazines, selling them to teachers, school districts, parents, and wanted to kind of transition to a new platform and really sought a partner to come in and help them think through exactly how they could develop this as a digital platform, what the business implications were, how they would make money, and what are some of the ways they could model it, and then how would we build it, how would we protect it, how would people use it. So we went through that whole process. I'm not going to go through all the aspects of it. It's over the course of the year we've built the product and then continue to iterate on it. But it started with a lot of research. We went to actually schools, sat in classrooms, looked at how kids use technology and very diverse educational environments from the socioeconomic perspective. We have poor schools, rich schools, and take a look at how they actually use the technology. And then from there, from the ground up, start to understand what do teachers want, what do students want, what will they use, what they like. The platform is largely based on reading. So like just a little snippet while I talk through, we built this really cool tool online that allows teachers and educators to kind of collaborate. Students can explore different content that they have, breaking apart all that magazine content, turning it into digital content, and let them see the connections between things. So the sun and how that affects plants, and how people used to worship the sun, and how it affects our weather, and all of that. And then from there, teachers can create classrooms, invite their students, assign reading. One of the cool features of this, probably one of the really special things about this, is that it's broken down. You see these little 560L, 750L. If you're an education major, you probably know what that is. But Those are Lexile levels, which means kids read at different levels in the classroom. So the same kids sitting next to each other, one might read 3 grades higher or 4 grades lower than the other one. And so this allows the teacher to put all the kids in the classroom read the same material at their level, and then all have a discussion on it so that you have the ability to get them going. And so it's pretty cool from that perspective. There's also lots of clicky interactive things where you can kind of see things come to life. And so we built a platform that's not your typical content management system, not your typical website builder, because it allowed them to create these unique little interfaces. So that's why it's different than your just kind of standard website. So the process we do when we go through this, I have just kind of a quick smattering of some of the exercises and things. A lot of what we do, what I like to say is when we get involved in a project, we're trying to have the same picture in our head as our client does, or as the founder of a company that we're partnering with. And so the closer and the sooner we can get to that same picture in our head, the more aligned we're going to be, less we're going to be coming back and redoing that type of thing. So we have a lot of exercises that we do because nothing exists when you start. You have ideas, you have dreams, all that kind of thing, but you have to try to get an understanding of where you want to go based on other stuff. So we have exercises like design clouds where we just throw a whole bunch of stuff out there, get reactions, talk about it, start thinking about do you like orderly things? Do you like it laid out like this, or are we thinking it would be more abstract? We talk about the way they envision the typography on the site and that type of thing. And so we get people to start coming up. Sometimes we put a number of characters across the front, and people come up and we ask them to get out of their seat, we'll pin something, pin a tail on the suit guy or the t-shirt guy, depending on how they kind of feel like their business should be portrayed. We do a lot of wireframing. You want to, these are folks in our office, think quickly and think kind of in a dirty fashion where you can just erase it if it's not right, or you can try lots of ideas quickly. It's a whole lot cheaper to experiment like this than it is to write a bunch of code, try it, and be like, not it, and then like rewind the clock 3 months. So it's a whole lot easier to do this kind of thing. So we do a lot of sketching and filling of boards and papers covering our walls in the office and kind of really beat it up. Look at that, they're so kind to me. We wear t-shirts. So they, this is Dom, he leads experience design, and so, he's really core on the academic side of it and often helps to shepherd a company or a product or a partner through this process. Here's the slide you're not supposed to have. It's really not that big a deal from a technical perspective, but we'll probably scrub client names off it. But this is in fact a major health system website. It's real hard to see. We'll let you see we'll keep a sanitized version in it either way, but hopefully it looks really confusing. That's what I was looking for. But the bottom line is this is identifying in the middle there, in that middle column with all those blocks stacked up are all individual components of technology we built, kind of like a switchboard, plugging in their external users, their internal users, and all the information they have to manage. So they've got systems that manage doctors and credentials, and there's events, and there's all these different pieces, and they've already got a lot of that technology in place. So the piece we have to build is kind of this switchboard in the middle that connects it all, and then gives the appropriate people in the organization the right levers to pull. So the marketing people can say, well, it's great, that's the doctor's credentials, but we want to kind of polish up. A lot of concepting, a lot of full color talks, presenting them, talking about what we like, don't like, about the different aspects. Again, trying to get to that same picture in our head, and we'll have to do that pretty quickly. So, awesome. You're welcome. Okay.
So, physical product design. Is there anyone in here, by the way, who's building a physical product? Maybe in the back, the solar. Okay. Is there the aquaponics system? And your the Mexican. Okay. So physical products are interesting because there's a lot of variables, right? When you're creating something that you can touch and feel, sometimes taste or smell. One of the winners last year was an air freshener company. There's a lot of influencing variables or factors that you might not think about initially. Whether that's how you're going to get them produced or how you're going to distribute them. All those types of things come into play. And in many cases, a lot of the business model questions are similar to electronically or digitally distributed plays or models, but the dynamics are just a little bit different. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you would go through sort of a physical product design process. And I'll relate this to actually the lens of a real product that Dave and Evan and I have been working on for longer than we'd like to admit. So, consumer needs. Obviously, some of the best inventions, right, have come out of there being actual needs, whether it's the record player, the phonograph, a couple, 100 years ago, or even things more recently like, the iPod or a digital music player. A lot of what you see in the market today will solve that problem by inventing X, Y, or Z. And it's funny because, the more and more stories you read about how products get envisioned and invented, I can tell you this, it's actually kind of messy. Does anyone remember there's a product for a women's hairstyling called Topsy-Tail? Does anyone remember the Topsy-Tail? It's like a little plastic hoop with a thing that you put in your hair and you make a ponytail, right? Topsy-Tail. Yeah, so think about the Topsy-Tail. It was invented by a woman inventor. She literally started with the idea of, how do I make giving my young daughter a ponytail easier? And how can I create something that both makes my life better, and then also, gives my daughter some variation in hairstyle, right? And she came up with literally a plastic hoop with a little thing that goes, through the body of your hair to help style it. And she came up with several prototypes. I think she made one prototype out of a drinking straw. And eventually, she refined her idea, she patented it, and eventually it turned into literally a multi-million-dollar product, this little plastic piece called the Topsy-Tail. I think you can still buy it. When you think about creating physical products, the onus is on you to frankly test your market. And when I say test your market, you don't have to invest tons of money in getting things like consumer focus groups together. I mean, big companies like Procter & Gamble do that, right? But at this level, testing your market is really about talking to everyone you can get to listen to you about your idea and whether they think it's feasible. And Evan and I have done this many, many times, and I will tell you that sometimes people will tell you that your idea is stupid. And they will actually use that word, or they will say things like, I would never use that, you should stop wasting your time thinking about this. One of those things, literally, that we're working on now, and we have been, is a smart envelope. So think about when you get a package or junk mail today. Although, I don't know, do college students get a lot of junk mail? Probably less than I get, but maybe you still get junk mail. So right now, when you open your junk mail, the advertiser doesn't know that you opened it, right? They have no ability to apply any science or analytics to the fact that you got a piece of mail and you opened it and probably read it. All they do is they use a shotgun approach, they blast the direct mail out, and that's it. Now they have statistics and they look at demographic studies and they have some level of idea how many people look at the stuff they send out. But they really don't have any hard science around it. Now contrast that with a banner ad model, right? When you go on a website and you click on a banner ad, or you frankly even see it, whoever is advertising that banner ad knows. They know how many impressions, they know how many click-throughs, they know how long you stayed on the banner ad, they know if you moused over it. All of those analytics form a really valuable picture for advertisers. So Dave, Evan, and I, a little over a year ago, had this really cockamamie idea that what if we could bring the same analytical model to direct mail? Because direct mail is about a $500 billion industry in the United States every year. So our ridiculous idea was, what if we could bring analytical, the ability to measure when people open the mail. So consumer needs, so we actually have talked to a lot of people. We've talked to folks in the direct mail industry. We've obviously talked to advertisers and marketers. And frankly, we've talked to folks on what's known as the programmatic side, the people that look at analytics, to get feedback on this idea. And interestingly, universally, we heard that is an amazing idea, good luck, you're never going to invent that. So the validation for us initially was, that is something that's really amazing, we would buy it, but that sounds like time travel to me, so when you have it, come back and tell me. So we got through sort of the first stage gate of product development, which is we got good feedback, right? We don't have any product yet, but we got good feedback. So in the spirit of failing fast, and that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to get to each place in the product development chain, series of events, with spending as least amount of time, money, and resources to get there, right? So in the spirit of failing fast, some of the next things that we did were we looked at literally what would it take in materials versus the cost. And I'll talk a little bit about what I mean by that. What would it take to invent this thing? Because this is a complicated, when you think about a smart envelope, right? When you open a package, there has to be a circuit in that package, So think about it this way. You open a package, it trips a circuit or it breaks a circuit. There's an antenna in the package that sends a signal to some network or this big ear that's listening for that signal that then reports to a system that we build that tells us whether it's been opened or not. So we had to go, and we're still in this process, frankly, but we've had to go and we've had to assess a couple things. Number one, can this technically be done from an electrical engineering perspective? That's really big. Number two, if it could, is this even viable from a product cost? Because if this whole thing costs $1,000 per envelope, obviously you're dead in the water. No one's going to buy it. And so where the three of us are right now is we have had a variety of meetings with companies and partners that do this type of engineering. And I can tell you, we've determined that, first of all, from an electrical engineering perspective, it's completely possible. Our challenge in terms of the material sourcing and the cost is the engineering time that's going to go into miniaturizing the components. Second, we have to figure out even if we could get it miniaturized, even if it's technically feasible, is there a manufacturer who could produce it at a cost that makes it palatable? So that's what we're working on now. So what I'm saying is your project might not be as sort of involved as our project, but you still have to ask yourself the same questions. If you're producing handmade mugs, are they handmade? Okay. If you're producing handmade mugs, how many hands are you going to need to make the mugs? I mean, without being sarcastic, how many resources are you going to need to make the mugs? Where are you going to get the raw materials to make said mugs? And then what level, and this is moving down to the next bullet here, what level of form factor will the mugs have? Are they going to be triple glazed? Are they going to be microwave safe? Is there going to be like iridescent flecks in the glaze, right? What are all the decisions that are going to go into the product that might drive things like cost or how long it might take to get to market? Those are the types of questions that you're going to have to consider. Now,
The moderator, you know about 10 times faster.
I do? Sorry. Oh, okay. All right, so we're done now. So what I'm saying is you're not going to be able to answer all those questions today because there's 1,000 questions. But what you need to start doing is you need to start going through the exercise of writing questions down because the exercise alone is really what's valuable. So obviously, there's a lot of research that goes into answering those questions. Once you start formulating questions, you then have to start answering them. This is where networking comes in. It's really hard to answer questions when it's just your team, right? And so I'm sure Professor Nejma has talked about it a lot, but you've got to socialize your idea. You've got to socialize your concept. You have to talk about it and ask people questions and find the answers. And the only way you can do that is by meeting people. And certainly meeting people can be meeting people in person or connecting with them through LinkedIn or some other online format, but you have to start connecting with folks that know about how to source clay and how to fire pottery and how to do that, at a certain scale that will make your business profitable. Prototyping is really important for two reasons. Number one, prototyping is important because it helps you get to a minimally viable product, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But it's also really important because prototyping indicates how difficult the actual production of your product is going to be. So we've seen this a lot. Basically, people will come to us because of what we do at Ant Culture with an amazing prototype of something. But at the end of the day, and this might hold true for what we're trying to do, It's just too expensive and too difficult to actually produce on a production line somewhere. So prototyping is really important because it points the way to some of the challenges you're going to have at making what you're making at scale. And then finally, that dovetails into the last point, which is all about, so great, you've got a prototype, you're pretty confident that it can be produced somewhere for a cost that enables you to, be a profitable business. So who are the partners at the end of the day that are going to help you build this? Our fancy term is sourcing product parts, but what we're really talking about are who are the players, who are the companies, who are the partners that are going to help you produce and manage the production and manage the distribution of your product. So now we're going to switch to a slightly different vein, digital products.
Digital products. So there's a temptation, or there's a kind of a belief that the physical products are the hard part because you got to make it, you got to know about supply chain stuff, you got to source it, you got to ship it, all that stuff. And then digital products are like this magic panacea. It's like all I do is just put it on a server, run it, money flows in. So there's some truth sometimes to that, but that's largely a myth. There's a lot to think about, and sometimes it's even trickier than well-established things like supply chain and that type of thing. So on the digital product side, also digital products can help you prototype physical products. So that's really nice about that. So three principles really to think about right out of the gate as you're thinking about and creating a digital product, is the platform that you're going to build on or that you're going to build. That's going to largely dictate kind of the path. Some of that has to do with, is it open source, is it not? What is the technology you're going to use? Are you going to build your own? Are you going to mesh together a bunch of things that exist? That's going to define kind of a lot about your business, how much of it you own, how much of it is new, how much of it sits on top of other people you're dependent on, whether that's where it's hosted or whether that's the technology it's built on, and what does their life cycle look like, because you're now bound to them if you built on them. So platform, definitely something to research and stay on top of. The interaction patterns, how people use the thing, whether it's a service or a product digitally, is super important and can be the winning factor. So if it's easy to use, if it's consistent in the design, there's a company, how many of you know who Slack is? Chat, right? Chat company. So they're killing it right now, obviously. Just got Microsoft's going to be a competitor there. You probably might saw that in the news. But they largely, one of the huge pieces of their success, they're worth billions, by the way, is a chat tool. Billions. So is that it was just easy to get onto, easy to integrate with, fun to use, easy to use. And so they just nailed that when largely we used 3 or 4 different chat tools in agriculture before that. They just kind of weren't that great. And there was issues you had with them, and Slack came out and nailed it. Now they're obviously for a lot of reasons in that, but they blew it up. So data, tons of value. Some companies are entirely valued just based on the data. The actual service they provide is nothing, and all the data that they're acquiring is largely their value, and so that's why they get like evaluations. What are you going to do with your data? Is the data really your play? And how are you going to manage it? Are you going to sell it? All that kind of things. Other huge principles about. How to go about kind of designing and building these types of digital products. We use things like storyboards. If you're not familiar, you should do that. It's like a comic strip of your idea, right? You can very quickly say it kind of goes like this. And you can draw paths for your product. Let's say it's an online or a mobile app or something like that. Draw them out, test them in paper. Say, I clicked that, I go here. You can storyboard it. Wireframes already showed how we use that, so I won't spend too much time on that, but it's cheap. You can make apps all day long and then also do that. And the information architecture is the key piece that I play often, where I kind of sit between that art and engineering world, talking to the business, the folks that we partner with and what they're looking to build, to understand and start thinking about. I'm good at like building. I was just wired this way. I can kind of see it in my head. And so find people that are that way, or if you're that way, dig into the nuts and bolts of how it's going to be put together from an information architecture. What's going to go where? How are you going to, how are you going to present it to people? And then what are you going to do on the underlying as far as storing it, and partitioning it, and serving it back to people? And what's that interaction look like? How are you going to do all that? So the information architecture is super important. So three methods I think that are really key to this, especially the startup piece of Okay, so I'm going to go fast. So service design. This is a fancy way of saying, your company might not be a product company, it might not be a digital company, but maybe you're creating a restaurant.
and you're literally serving people. In fact, the winner of last year's Venture Challenge, Courtney, she has an accounting company. It's a service-based company that's helping folks with accounting needs. So, again, a lot of the same principles hold true here, but I think when we talk about service design specifically, the first place you have to start is you have to be extremely user-centered. And that's just a really fancy way of saying, when you go into I'm trying to think of a great restaurant here, an Olive Garden, everything about the Olive Garden experience has been thought about. Or maybe I should say Disney World. If you've ever been to Disney World or a theme park, every single aspect of that experience someone thought about and engineered. And they did it because they're meeting the needs and desires and wants of their target audiences. So, you have to be as user-centered as possible. You have to, again, get in front of potential users of your service and ask them questions, get to know them. So system mapping, that's kind of like a storyboard in real life, or it's like a wireframe like Evan was talking about. If you're creating a restaurant, map out literally how people are going to move through your restaurant experience. So when they enter the restaurant, is there someone to greet them? Is there some place where they sit to wait if there's not enough tables? Think about all of those interactions and how they play from one transition to the other to make it as smooth as possible. Holistic, I think that's a great idea, and I think this is where a lot of service-based plays kind of fall down because, again, when you think about service, it's got to be the whole deal, right? Like, in other words, if you're going to Disney World and had a really great time at the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, but everything else about going to Disney World stink, that wouldn't be very good. That wouldn't be a good experience. The whole thing has to work together as a seamless experience front to back. And again, the only way you get there is by doing kind of what Evan was saying in real life. You've got to storyboard that out. Personas. So every service company that you've interacted with at, quote, the enterprise scale, like an Olive Garden, they have a really good grasp on who their customers are. And they typically categorize them in personas. So they might have, one persona might be a single mom with 2 kids. Another persona might be a family who's looking for a great Friday night meal. Another persona might be a couple who's on date night. What I'm saying is try to group your target audiences into actionable categories that you can quickly refer to mentally, and always keep them top of mind so that you always know who your audience, who your customers are. Customer journey map. Illustrate the process a user goes through. So again, this is very similar to the initial storyboard, but this is a little bit different because it's like a higher fidelity version. What I mean by that is once you have sort of the guts of how people are going to move through your service experience, you've got to eventually start putting some flesh to the bone, so to speak. So in other words, if you were a restaurant, and certainly when people come in the door, you're going to greet them, and you know that they need to wait somewhere for their table. Well, the customer journey map is really focusing on, okay, when we're talking about waiting for a table, how do we make that experience as great as it can be? So what are the more granular things and details that we need to think about? And it's not complicated. All you really need to do is write a list for each one of those. Again, our objective here is to do things in a way where we don't have to write code or we don't have to invoke costs on photography. It's really about planning. And then finally, service blueprint. So obviously before you are ready to capitalize your company, before you're ready to get in business for real, right? You should obviously take all of your planning and then map it to kind of like a final document. Now this doesn't mean that it isn't going to change, because it probably will change, but what it means is that not only for yourself, but also for the people that are going to work for you or be associated with your company, everyone has to understand what role they play in the service exchange. Again, this comes down to Olive Garden. When you walk into an Olive Garden, there's a person who stands right there to greet you. And his or her job is to obviously take your name, figure out how many people are in your party, and sit you right there for the next hour and a half on Friday night, right? That's their role. What I'm saying is, in the service blueprint, you need to map out those roles so that you understand who's responsible for delivering, across that spectrum. So, Yes.
I'll just go back for 1 second. Maybe I didn't, language got my way, but for the service design arena, where do you actually get to kind of offer definitions, you know, the things that are offered as part of that service portfolio? Is that, I'm just trying to think of where that fits into this framework, because ultimately these guys are, you know, actually 2 or 3 of them are service providers in their model, so I'm just trying to think, where's the offered definition come out?
That's a great question, and it's really in the initial stages of particularly the user-centered aspect of service design. Meaning that, you know, whether it's linking, you know, pets, abandoned pets up with owners, obviously there's a hypothesis there of what the service is, but you kind of have to test that against, you know, against what people's opinions are, and that's really.
I like that. It's like pet dating.
Pet dating, right. Swiping right or left for pet. And I think what you're talking about, Brian, you know, categorizing that and defining that happens very early on.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
What are we doing on time? All right, everybody thinks Mr. Eric Reeves knows what this is, right? MVP, minimum viable product. So I'll read this so I get it right. This is a term he coined. An MVP, or minimum viable product, is the version of a new product which allows a team to collect the maximum amount of learning from a customer with the least amount of effort. So this is like the minimal amount you have to make to call it your thing so that you can test it with people. So that is a donut. It is a very plain donut. It has nothing spectacular about it, but it qualifies as a donut, and you can there extrapolate everything else about what the product could be in your imagination from that minimal viable product. It's a very simple explanation. I think you can find, right? So you're trying to fail fast. You're trying to figure out how to go through the build iteration process as quickly as possible. So you're going to declare your assumptions. You want to build something. You're going to run some experiments on it. You're going to test it with people. You're going to translate the feedback you get. You're going to learn from that, and you're going to do it all again, right? So you want to try to shorten. And so Eric's whole thing, and the whole plan is with Lean is to really compress that whole iteration so that you can do it as quickly as possible and get feedback faster. So that, you know, sometimes the market window closes. If you spend a year and a half making your thing, sometimes the opportunity goes away by then. Or you've gone down a path that you've got back all the way back up to that fork in the road and not needed yet, right? So that's the whole point of the process, the MVP process. And it's tough, I'll be honest with you, like we do this, and it's very hard. It's tough you're pushing people, you're pushing ideas, you're pushing conflict, you're trying to get people to break it. And so you're fighting for your ideas, you're fighting for what gets built, and you're having, you know, in-depth discussions about little pieces of the process or the experience and what you think is the most valuable thing. We've got an exercise here that kind of helps to direct that. We'll be jumping into shortly, but this is very core to you finding out if your idea is going to hold up. And to Josh's point, where people tell you that it stinks, they wouldn't use it, they don't like it, those are your friends. That's very good information so that you don't waste a bunch of time and money, and you can either pivot or, you know, you can change it, right? So very key.
Yeah. So
Here, like a couple more slides here.
So in terms of you know, the IVC, we put this slide in here because this really relates directly to the judging, and kind of like what the judges looked for last year. And you know, Professor Nejma was wonderful and asked me to be a judge, so I can kind of give you kind of a first-hand look at sort of the criteria that we looked at. And I think in the packet of information, it does give you sort of the breakdown. But in terms of viability, the thing that we were really looking for is if the team, and I'm pretty sure everyone did actually, if the team had some form of what Evan was talking about, some form of minimally viable product. Now, let me define that, okay? Because some teams one team was an air freshener team, so their minimally viable product was an air freshener, right? It's right there, you can smell it, it smells great. But another team was a team that had developed essentially an intelligent mirror, right? So the mirror was in concept a medicine cabinet that would be able to see or know that people took their meds. So the interesting thing about the mirror, it was minimally viable in that part of it worked, but part of it didn't. And that was okay. That team was still a finalist because they clearly described to us how it should work and how it would work, right? And when they talked to you, it was like, oh, okay, I completely understand that that part doesn't work, but I know from your description how it is going to work in the future. So it was very concrete. And conversely, I'm going to pick on Andrew, Faith Connect. They had a great minimally viable product because they actually had a website to show. Now again, not everything on the website worked or worked the way it should, but it was enough of a product, so to speak, that we could clearly see how it was supposed to function. Impact potential. You know, this literally came down to, and the really cool thing I think about everyone in this room is all of your plays, all of your business plans to date seem really impactful. But a lot of the criteria that the judges discussed was, you know, is this going to have a societal effect? Is this going to help people? And what we looked for was like really tangible ways of how it would help people. So the winner last year, Courtney, it's really simple. She created an accounting company, and the accounting company and the services of that company were focused primarily on helping missionaries who were out of country. It's very easy to understand, and it was very clear to us what the benefit to, you know, the larger impact, the larger benefit was. And then finally, the business model. We definitely weighted that, but we weighted it less than the other two things. The business model question for us was, frankly, could this be a real company? Could this company produce revenue? Could it make money? Could it, you know, make margin? And that was important to see that the teams had thought about that. But frankly, you're starting. So, you know, it's not like we expect the startups to have super, you know, great answers there because you're just starting. But we like to see that there was a thought process there.
So, I want to push this to the road out, not so much as the next year, but do you guys know what agile development is?
Yes.
So if you don't know what it is, the short synopsis is.
They better know what this is.
Okay.
But not everybody does.
Okay. So you can read a lot about it. There's, there's Henry Davis and Sprung and all this good stuff. So the bottom line is you are breaking down the project into sprints, typically, which are fairly short durations. And at the end of every sprint, you have a thing that you make. So you break it down, you chunk it down into pieces, and you commit to what you're going to make. And rather than forecast and say, which was typically called waterfall, here's the entire plan for how we're going to make the whole thing from beginning to end. We're just going to take it in bite-sized pieces, and we're going to prioritize what's the most important. We're just going to bang those out as quickly as possible. So there's a lot more to it than that, but all right. So now we're going to talk about exercise we have here called red routes. It's pretty straightforward. Red routes. Let me skip to this slide. You can see. So as you can see on the diagram here, it's pretty straightforward. There's two axes, people and time. And what's a little hard to read there is in the upper right-hand corner, that's what you want to focus on. What are the most people going to be doing all the time with your product or service? And so those are the pieces, you know, it's, people talk a lot about, you know, how am I going to get people into my product, how am I going to buy my product, how am I going to sign up for my product or my service. And that's a challenge, of course. That's a marketing challenge and other challenges. But it's, you know, those barriers, there's ways to do that. There's ways to get people in, but how are you going to keep them there? You have to have something of value that's going to have them coming back. And so that's what you're trying to identify as you are planning your product. So in this example, there's a bunch of different pieces on here that guide you from this. Oh, by the way, sorry. This is a car satellite navigation system that kind of plotted in here as the example. So everyone all the time is planning a route, get me from here to there, right? At the very opposite of the spectrum, very little people only some of the time are like setting flight mode or uploading photos or changing the voice commands. Those are things that very few people you can do in the product. It's good to customizable areas, but you get the idea, right? If you're going to start, you got to hit the most important things first. So we're going to go through an exercise where you guys can, we're doing this now, right?
Yes.
Okay. You basically, there's very simple steps. You want to identify the jobs, the tasks, the things that your customers are trying to achieve. Then you're going to, how often will they need it? And so that goes in the upper right. You plot those on the grid. The top right quadrant are the red routes. Make sense?
The things that you need to focus most on right now as a business startup.
So we thought we would have you guys try to start doing that, whether you immediately know or whether you get stuck, and we would walk around and spy on you and see how it all
It's a big step up. It's still like 2005. So yes, so
We'll get the video out.
Yeah, and if you can just reach out, say, hey, you can stay here, check out She wasn't here when I was in the process. That's fine.
You know, so how do you
My daughter,
so many layers. Yeah, and I'm excited about
What'd you say? What do you guys want to say?
one of us, how do you apply something that's big? Yeah. So, yeah. And then I'm just thanks for asking me questions. It's good to meet you.
Everybody, before they leave, I just want to get a picture. picture. I want to get a photo of you guys here. So please come on up. Everyone, come on. I want to just say thank you to Ant Culture. We're going to have a photo op and we're going to let you leave with that. Curtis, you need to be in here. Maybe we can go find some.
You back up? We not fit? We're just waiting for him.
Bystander to take the
Do you see the hover one? The hover camera? You just throw it out there. Yeah.
digital mapping.
So it's like hover, and I gotta wait 10 minutes for it to get. Your photographer is in route.
Thank you so much. Just come on up. Come on up.
Oh, are you, okay. Do you want me to get up or?
Yeah, just a little. So I did that.
Alright, got it. Turn it horizontal. This side?
Alright. Alright.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, no problem.
For the shaking out.
Yeah, I was on something.
You bet.
Oh, yes.
It was.
Yeah,
It's always
I was like,
Yeah, I know.
So anyway, thanks.
Thank you.
So does everybody have some shot at a red route? Something in that corner that people want to do? Okay. So the final embarrassment of the night is that you need to read. You need to let us know what you came up with. If you didn't come up with anything, that's fine. But we'd love to hear what you came up with. Just knowing kind of what your play is.
Well, I opened the Lancaster refugee application.
Yes.
And I mean, it's a little broad, but I said that all the people, all the time, will be using our app to look for services that they are trying to get in contact with.
Yeah, like social services. Exactly. Yep. Okay. Awesome. All right. We'll just go this way. So you're on.
All the people all the time want the solar sculpture to be aesthetically pleasing where it is. So it can be environmentally impacting and it can charge things, but if it doesn't look good, they're not going to want it.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's a differentiated product. That makes sense. Very much so. All right. Here we go.
So just to top right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're saying that all the people all the time, what the practical use of the mug, something to drink, favorite hold, hot liquid, just like the basic foundation.
Okay. So I would agree with the physical product. I think one of the challenges you have is that you have that great story too. So the value proposition, why you get that thing, has to be somehow there. They want to use it. They want to be reminded as they're using that mug every day, or something maybe that can be built in there. It makes it look better. But yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I know for all the people all the time, fill out and edit applications, so they use information hours.
Okay. Or even they're looking for the users are looking right for that. So you want to be able to find that? Yeah, absolutely. Okay. We'll go. So we'll go back.
We're having we're trying to figure out how to but all the people all the time eat food. So we
Okay.
can start with that. We're
I mean, that's accurate. I agree. Yeah, aquaponics, right? Aquaponics. So, okay.
We kind of got stuck on the food insecure people that we're ultimately serving. Their only role is to eat the food that we give them. So they don't really have they don't have a lot of tasks to perform. But the people who produce the food, they have a lot of tasks. But so and then our wheat producing systems to give the people who produce the food. So we kind of got stuck on which perspective of those kind of three we're trying to model. And I think I can model all three.
Yeah, right. Are you fishing or making fishers, right? So,
We're kind of doing all three.
yeah. Teaching them how to fish or making fish or you got fish, so we can use it. Okay, makes sense. Yeah, so you could actually fill out two. I mean, you can, and the end consumer eating the food and benefiting may even just be the output of everyone else. Yeah.
That's where we kind of got stuck.
Yeah,
on
I agree.
of which perspective.
Right. But at the end of the day, someone's eating it, so, yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I would kind of piggyback off of that because we kind of had the struggle of, is our customer the company that's buying our service or is the customer the patient that we're reaching our So we kind of split off and did both because we weren't sure
Yeah.
before. But we said that generally all people all the time will receive choice access to visual arts technical or restricting circumstances.
Okay. I agree, you guys have both sides as well, so, see, this is easy. Back.
We said all the people all the time will want to ultimately get a unique cultural travel experience.
Okay. Yep. And we were chatting a little bit, but sometimes it's easy to overthink it, and at the end of the day, you want them to come and plan a trip, right? So, I mean, you've got the value kind of tied to it, which is nice, about the differentiation of why they use you versus someone else, but some of it, there's the different sides of it, but when you're thinking about building the thing, what are you going to do?
Got a similar problem. I identified 3 primary beneficiaries: the mentee, the young man involved in a crisis around unplanned pregnancy, the mentor who wants to speak life into that, and the entire pregnancy resource center pro-life world is desperately trying to be relevant in today's culture. So for all 3 of those, my top right for the mentee is just learn how to be a great dad. All the time, all those people will learn how to be a great dad. Mentors, all the time, all those people will impart wisdom to the mentees who want to be great dads. And in the PRC, pro-life world in general, maybe in a consultant fashion, all those people all the time want desperately to actually connect with young men in an active way.
Yeah,
Or will.
that makes sense. All 3 accounts, and you're right, we do kind of all overlapping
Yeah.
audiences, which is good. It's not a problem, especially when they work together.
Yeah, and that's what, if I avoid any of them, there's like this really clear void that's like the elephant in the room.
Yeah. Right. Clear need, you're just gonna have to get all the arms to work together. Need them all.
So in the presentation, just due to time, the last few sections are actually just tools that you can look up to do things like help you rapidly prototype if you're not a developer, whether it's an app or whether it's doing things like wireframing through a tool called Envision. There's a number of different tools that we sort of outline that you can look up in the presentation. And then finally, the last slide in there is just a glossary of sorts with various terms that you might want to look up, just Google as you go through kind of your business model development process. These terms might be things that you hear, or they might be things like wireframing, for example, that if you want to go back and just take a look at what wireframing entails, it's a great place to start.
Yeah, so you get what this prototype tools, Google prototype tools, you probably already have, but there's ones where you can take pictures on your phone with the app, and it is an app. You can draw little hot boxes that say go to the next screen, and you can just make apps out of pencil really quick. You can do it tonight. You can make an app and try it. It's gonna be ugly, but you can hand it something up here. What would you do? Would you click plan a trip? Would you select IMA and core and T, right? Or are you gonna make 2 apps? Are you gonna make 2 platforms? How are you gonna do? So you can kind of play with that and hand it to people that have no idea what you're talking about, get their feedback immediately. See what they click. They click the right thing. It's kind of a game. It's kind of fun. It's also disappointing a lot of the times they don't. So, but that's what you want.
So, are there any questions about really anything? Our greatest failures, maybe? Are there any questions about, whether it's business model development or, startups or anything kind of in the sphere of that? Yes. Absolutely.
You were a judge last year, so you have a very informed perspective about teams, where they are now. If you had to give a thumbnail piece of advice from your experience of being a judge last year, teams early in the life cycle of the competition, what would you share?
Sure. So, and this was not just my feedback, but there were 2 other judges on the panel, and the one thing that we were, and I'll say this in a good way, shocked about was the level of preparedness that the teams brought forth. It was really quite amazing, and I say that, certainly I'm biased because I'm a Messiah alum, but I say that from having judged other competitions from other institutions. And the one thing I was really, really surprised at was the level of quality in the thought of the business model, the amazing amount of execution in the MVP that the teams brought forward. So I think for the teams here, obviously the big advantage that you have between now and April is time, right? Because there's a spring cohort, but you've got time on your side. And I think it's really, really easy between now and then to kind of for the next month and a half or 2 months kind of slack off and not, work in a dedicated fashion on whatever your model or your play is. If there was any advice that I could give, and I hate giving advice, it would be simply to set aside set time periods that you work together as a team. And I totally understand that everyone has different things going on, right? You've got, you're in choir, you're doing sports or whatever, but you've got to set aside time every week or every other week or whatever it is to do this. Basically to put some rigor in it. Because I will tell you this, the teams that make it, all the way to the finals, they've got their stuff together. They really do. So the time management is probably what I would say is probably your biggest challenge. And fortunately, it's also your biggest advantage that you've got a few months here.
Good questions, comments, and those get great for you guys. Pete?
This is really just about hate culture. Do you guys ever do A/B testing with your stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, in a couple different ways. Some of it's just using, for example, JavaScript platforms. If it's on a web product, we can show people different things and then gather the input and feedback on it. Sometimes we do it in paper and set people in front of different pieces of paper that are drawn different ways and say, which one works for you. Give them a goal, give them a task. Don't ever, by the way, just say, hey, what do you think? Give them a task. Can you do this? How would you do that? How would you find, how would you match yourself to find a path, right? Or how would you find a trip? So that would give you constructive feedback. So it's like, well, kind of like the roundabout better than this where that's not what you do. Yeah. There's if you're building a digital product, just Google it. There's a lot of others you just drop in. Yeah.
So this last summer at a British Academy, I was able to interact with someone about the idea of modern admin real briefly. Someone that works in a similar field, knows the problem intimately. And as I've explained, that part of what I want to do is lead the way for the PRC and pro-life world into the digital age, catch them up with relevancy. And that involved, creating a beautiful, useful app. And this guy, he didn't have enough time to unpack, so maybe you can briefly. He was like, don't think about the app yet. It's going to get in the way. It's going to take so much work. It's so exhaustive. And you've got to make sure you have another product. It's what he was. I think what he was trying to say. I'm trying to use terms from tonight. A minimally viable product.
Yeah.
Before you start building an app around that product. Just maybe can you speak to that? Why would he say that? Or
Well, I wasn't obviously in the conversation, but I'm guessing, based on my own experiences, that he's just talking about the rigor involved in making and deploying an app.
Okay.
And so, there's largely two platforms, right? You've got iOS and Android, so doing both of those. There's a lot of different ways to make an app, whether you're making native apps, which is, specifically on each platform from the ground up, writing code twice for each platform and all the features that go into it, or whether you're using one of the hybrid technologies that kind of lets you create it once or create about 80% of it once, and then so it could have to do with the technical development aspect of it and going down that path. It could have to do with just worrying about, how much of that thought and how much of that testing has gone into it before you make a thing? Because when you do invest in making a thing, you want it to be as close as possible to what you need. So they may be commenting on, have you tried paper? Have you handed people an ugly paper one or one that you sketched and gotten their feedback on it? To try to figure out as many things as possible not to do before you make them in your app.
Yeah.
But it could be, I would guess, if they're on the technical side, it could just be that there's a lot to do.
that makes sense. Because he knew where I was at as far as developing an idea. And when I mentioned doing an app, I meant from the ground up. Starting with the paper and the wireframing.
Yeah.
Not just trying to watch the quickly, but I think it was more, it takes so much manpower.
Yeah.
And time to do it.
Right. Web technologies are sometimes faster, so doing a website or a mobile website, just making a mobile HTML website could be one way to do it a lot quicker and then allow you to adjust. The other thing about apps is once you throw it, you kind of have like one shot. You do it, you put it, you download it, they go, right, we all do that. Like, I don't know, it just goes to like the back half of your iPhone or your Android and never touch it again. So websites get a little bit easier. Next time you come to it, it's different. Whereas I got to go download that app again. So there's a lot of aspects of